You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your educational journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Nonverbal communication is one of the most powerful yet easily misunderstood aspects of teamwork. Much of what happens in collaborative settings is not spoken outright, but expressed through tone, pace, posture, or subtle shifts in attention. These signals provide valuable context that can help facilitators, leaders, and teammates understand whether a group is engaged, hesitant, aligned, or struggling. Unlike formal agenda items or written outputs, nonverbal cues reveal the undercurrent of team dynamics, the feelings and perceptions that drive behavior but may never be articulated explicitly. When read carefully and with humility, these cues enable facilitators to adjust pacing, invite quieter voices, or clarify confusion before it becomes conflict. Yet interpretation must always be cautious, as overconfidence in a single gesture or tone can lead to false conclusions. Nonverbal awareness is therefore about enhancing clarity and inclusion, not about mind reading or stereotyping. Signal categories provide a structured way to interpret the wide range of nonverbal behaviors encountered in meetings and team discussions. Paralinguistics refers to tone, pace, pitch, and volume of speech. Kinesics focuses on posture, gestures, and movement. Oculesics studies eye contact and gaze behavior, while proxemics considers physical space and distance. Chronemics examines timing, pauses, and rhythms of interaction. Each category provides different insights. For example, paralinguistics may reveal stress through rushed speech, while proxemics can indicate comfort or discomfort based on seating arrangements. By distinguishing categories, facilitators avoid lumping all signals into vague impressions and instead consider how each channel contributes to the whole picture. This structured approach makes observation more reliable and reduces the risk of misattribution. Teams that develop shared awareness of these categories gain a richer vocabulary for discussing how they interact, leading to more intentional and inclusive collaboration. The baseline versus deviation principle is essential for accurate interpretation of nonverbal cues. Rather than assuming universal meanings, facilitators learn the typical patterns of individuals and groups, then pay attention to changes from that baseline. For example, if a usually animated team member becomes unusually quiet and withdrawn, the deviation may signal disengagement or discomfort. Conversely, silence from someone who typically reflects before speaking may be perfectly normal. Baseline knowledge prevents stereotyping and ensures that meaning is inferred from change, not from fixed assumptions about personality or culture. This principle requires observation over time and genuine curiosity about individuals' styles. Facilitators who practice it build trust because they demonstrate attentiveness without judgment. The emphasis shifts from labeling behavior to noticing variation, which is a far more reliable indicator of meaning. This approach respects individual differences while still allowing teams to respond constructively to signals. Tone, pace, and pause patterns often reveal more than the words themselves. A confident, steady tone may indicate certainty, while rushed or hesitant speech can suggest stress, doubt, or incomplete understanding. Long pauses may reflect thoughtful reflection, discomfort, or uncertainty about whether it is safe to speak. Facilitators who notice these vocal cues can adjust accordingly, perhaps by slowing the conversation, offering clarification, or explicitly inviting questions. For example, if someone hesitates repeatedly when presenting an idea, the facilitator might gently ask, "What concerns are you weighing?" Pauses also create opportunities for inclusion, as they can open space for quieter voices to enter. Recognizing patterns in paralinguistics is not about catching people out, but about enabling smoother, safer dialogue. By attending to tone and timing, teams uncover hidden concerns earlier and make space for contributions that might otherwise remain unspoken. Turn-taking dynamics provide critical insight into team inclusion and power balance. Frequent interruptions or overlaps can signal competition for dominance, while long silences after questions may indicate fear or disengagement. In healthy interactions, turn-taking feels fluid, with contributions balanced across participants. A facilitator noticing repeated interruptions may intervene with structured rounds or time boxing to restore equity. Conversely, if silence follows an invitation to comment, it may suggest that the topic is unclear, too sensitive for the group, or needs to be reframed in smaller forums. Turn-taking also reveals who feels comfortable participating and whose voices are marginalized. By attending to these patterns, facilitators can identify when interventions are needed to create fairness. Over time, balanced turn-taking fosters psychological safety and improves idea quality because more perspectives are shared. Teams that monitor turn-taking dynamics actively strengthen trust and ensure that participation is not dominated by a few. Facial expressions, including fleeting micro-expressions, can provide clues to alignment, skepticism, or confusion. A raised eyebrow, a furrowed brow, or a quick smirk may signal disagreement or uncertainty, even when words remain polite. However, facilitators must interpret these signals cautiously. A single expression should never be treated as conclusive evidence, since people's expressions may be shaped by habit, stress, or cultural norms. Instead, patterns of expressions across a discussion may indicate whether alignment is genuine or superficial. For example, multiple people exchanging skeptical looks during a proposal may suggest that deeper concerns need to be voiced. The role of emotional intelligence here is to notice without overreacting, inviting clarification with neutral prompts, such as, "I sense hesitation. What thoughts are we holding back?" Facial cues are useful signals, but they gain meaning only when verified through respectful dialogue and not treated as proof on their own. Posture and orientation are often overlooked, but provide strong indicators of engagement or withdrawal. Leaning forward, making open gestures, and orienting toward the speaker generally indicate attentiveness and interest. Crossing arms, turning away, or slouching may suggest disengagement, skepticism, or fatigue. Facilitators who notice disengaged postures can decide whether to check understanding, rotate airtime, or introduce a break to refresh focus. For example, if several people slump or turn away during a technical explanation, it may be time to pause and summarize key points before continuing. Orientation within a group also matters. When participants physically or virtually turn toward one another, collaboration feels more cohesive. As with all cues, posture must be interpreted in context. Someone leaning back may simply be thinking. Still, paying attention to body orientation allows facilitators to gauge energy and decide when to intervene to maintain inclusion and shared focus. Gesture patterns amplify meaning and reveal confidence levels. Expansive gestures often signal comfort and enthusiasm, while constrained or overly controlled gestures may indicate insecurity or overcompensation. Repetitive fidgeting can suggest nervousness, while purposeful gestures reinforce clarity in explanation. For example, a facilitator using open hand movements while summarizing builds a sense of inclusivity and transparency. Conversely, a participant clutching their notes tightly may need encouragement to share thoughts openly. Observing gestures across the group also highlights balance. When gestures are absent entirely, discussions may feel flat or disengaged. Facilitators can use their own gestures deliberately to model openness and to emphasize key points. The goal is not to police gesture style, but to recognize when patterns may limit collaboration or obscure meaning. By tuning into gesture dynamics, teams can improve clarity, reduce misunderstandings, and normalize authentic expression. Gestures add energy and texture to communication that words alone cannot convey. Group energy cues often provide early warnings about attention shifts or disengagement. Collective stillness may reflect focused attention or, conversely, boredom. Side conversations can indicate that the agenda has drifted or that subtopics need their own space. Rapid back-channel exchanges, whether whispered in person or in chat online, suggest parallel concerns that may undermine shared focus. Facilitators who notice these patterns can adjust by checking priorities, clarifying objectives, or resetting energy with a short break. For example, if multiple side conversations erupt, the facilitator might ask, "What questions are emerging that we should address together?" Group-level cues matter because they reflect the shared mood, not just individual reactions. By reading the energy of the room, facilitators can make timely adjustments that preserve inclusion and productivity. Awareness of group cues ensures that meetings remain dynamic and that the whole team feels engaged in the process. Safety versus fear signals often reveal when discussions are drifting into sensitive or threatening territory. Nervous laughter, hedging language, or fixed smiles may indicate that people are masking discomfort rather than speaking freely. Recognizing these cues helps facilitators decide when to reframe, slow down, or move the discussion into smaller groups for safer exploration. For instance, if repeated nervous chuckles follow a suggestion, the facilitator might say, "I'm hearing mixed signals. What concerns might we be missing?" Safety cues, such as open questions and candid sharing, signal that candor is welcome, while fear cues suggest defensive adaptation. Identifying these subtle differences prevents issues from being buried and allows the team to address them constructively. Emotional intelligence plays a key role here, ensuring that facilitators approach signals with empathy rather than confrontation. This sensitivity helps preserve trust and prevents fear from undermining collaboration or decision-making. Bias and misread risks must be acknowledged whenever interpreting nonverbal cues. People naturally fall into attribution errors, assuming that behavior reflects character rather than context. Cultural assumptions can also distort interpretation. For example, equating silence with disengagement when it may reflect respect or processing time. Emotional intelligence requires facilitators to treat nonverbal signals as hypotheses, not facts. Verification through neutral prompts is essential before drawing conclusions. For example, if someone avoids eye contact, the facilitator might ask, "Would you like more time to reflect before sharing?" rather than assuming disinterest. By treating signals as starting points for inquiry, teams reduce misinterpretation and prevent bias from creating mistrust. Awareness of these risks keeps nonverbal observation constructive, reinforcing inclusion rather than stereotyping. Facilitators who remain cautious and explicit in their checks demonstrate respect and fairness, ensuring that nonverbal awareness serves the team rather than distorting it. Cultural and individual differences shape how nonverbal signals should be understood. Eye contact norms vary widely. In some cultures, steady eye contact signals respect, while in others it may be seen as aggressive. Expressiveness also differs. Some groups rely on animated gestures, while others prize restraint. Turn-taking styles vary between cultures that value direct interruption and those that emphasize waiting for cues. Inclusive facilitation means adapting without pathologizing variance. For example, a quieter participant from a reflective culture may need explicit invitation to contribute, but should not be judged as disengaged. Emotional intelligence recognizes these differences and avoids one-size-fits-all interpretations. By acknowledging diversity in communication norms, teams reduce bias and create fairness. Cultural and individual awareness turns nonverbal observation into a tool for inclusion, ensuring that meaning is preserved without forcing uniform behaviors. Respect for variance builds stronger collaboration across diverse contexts. Accessibility considerations further highlight the limits of assuming universal nonverbal norms. Neurodiverse individuals may use eye contact, tone, or gestures differently, and people with hearing or speech differences may rely on alternative cues entirely. Assuming a single standard of appropriate nonverbal behavior risks exclusion. Facilitators must approach signals with openness and respect, ensuring that differences are not pathologized. For example, A participant who avoids eye contact may simply be focusing cognitively, not signaling disengagement. Accessibility practices may include offering multiple ways to participate, such as chat channels or written reflections, so that contribution is not tied to one mode of expression. By respecting varied communication styles, teams reinforce psychological safety and inclusion. Nonverbal awareness is powerful, but only when coupled with humility and adaptability. Accessibility ensures that these practices support all participants, not just those who fit conventional norms. Remote and hybrid contexts require adaptation of nonverbal awareness, since many traditional cues are limited or absent. In video calls, latency and camera positioning affect timing and eye contact. In chat, response speed and message style become signals of engagement. Voice quality, background noise, and delays may indicate stress or technical barriers. Facilitators learn to interpret alternative cues, such as silence in chat threads or abrupt disconnects, as possible signals of disengagement or confusion. Norms for response windows, use of reactions, or clarifying summaries help maintain readability. For example, agreeing that participants acknowledge questions in chat even if they cannot answer immediately prevents assumptions of disinterest. Hybrid settings add further complexity, as in-room participants may dominate while remote voices fade. Intentional facilitation, such as round-robin check-ins, ensures inclusion. Adapting nonverbal awareness to remote contexts keeps transparency and trust intact across distributed environments. Meeting environment factors also shape nonverbal cues, reminding facilitators to interpret carefully. Time of day can affect energy, with early morning meetings showing subdued gestures and late-day sessions revealing fatigue. Agenda load influences posture and engagement, as participants may slump when overloaded or lean in when fresh. Decision stakes also amplify cues. Stress behaviors may arise not from interpersonal issues but from the weight of a high-stakes choice. Facilitators must consider these environmental influences before attributing signals to individuals. For example, yawns in an evening meeting may reflect exhaustion rather than disinterest in the topic. By accounting for context, facilitators prevent unfair assumptions and adapt the environment itself, such as shortening agendas or providing breaks to support better engagement. Recognizing the influence of meeting conditions underscores that nonverbal cues are situational data, not fixed truths, and must be read with nuance. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Facilitator adjustments are the first line of response when nonverbal cues suggest the group is drifting, disengaging, or feeling tense. A skilled facilitator pays attention not only to what is said but how it is said, noticing shifts in tone, body language, or timing that indicate discomfort or hesitation. Adjustments may include slowing the pace of conversation, providing clarifying summaries, or explicitly inviting input from quieter members. For example, if participants begin leaning back, crossing arms, or avoiding eye contact, the facilitator might pause and ask, "Do we need to revisit our assumptions before moving forward?" Such interventions prevent small signals of disengagement from growing into full misalignment. Adjustments are not about over-interpreting every gesture but about treating observable deviations as potential feedback. By responding thoughtfully, facilitators keep energy steady, maintain inclusion, and help the team convert subtle signals into constructive dialogue. Inclusion techniques ensure that airtime is shared fairly and that dominant voices do not overshadow others. Structured rounds give each person a defined opportunity to speak, while time boxing prevents any one individual from monopolizing the floor. Speaking order rotation helps rebalance patterns when the same people habitually lead. For instance, in a retrospective, the facilitator might rotate who shares first, ensuring that perspectives from quieter members are heard without being influenced by more vocal colleagues. These techniques normalize balanced contribution and signal that every voice matters to decision quality. They also reduce the cognitive load of competing for space, creating psychological safety for those less comfortable interrupting. Inclusion techniques are not rigid rules but flexible scaffolds that support equity. By making participation intentional, teams improve idea diversity, build trust, and prevent nonverbal cues of withdrawal or frustration from signaling that voices are being lost. Calibrated probing prevents misreads by testing interpretations with neutral, open prompts. Instead of assuming that a frown signals disagreement or that silence reflects consent, facilitators ask clarifying questions. For example, they might say, "I noticed a pause there. What thoughts are you weighing?" Or, "What concerns might we be overlooking?" These probes invite context without confrontation, giving participants space to articulate meaning in their own words. Calibrated probing also reduces bias, since it shifts from assumption to inquiry. Neutral phrasing prevents defensiveness and demonstrates respect for individual perspectives. This approach helps surface hidden concerns, reducing the risk of late resistance or disengagement. Probing is not about interrogation but about gentle verification, ensuring that nonverbal signals are understood accurately. Over time, calibrated probing becomes a cultural norm, reminding teams that observation is the beginning of understanding, not its conclusion. Reflect and validate practices turn tentative signals into opportunities for shared clarity. By summarizing both content and observed emotion, facilitators make it easier for participants to confirm or correct interpretations. For example, a facilitator might say, "I'm hearing hesitation about the timeline. Am I reading that right?" This approach validates emotions as legitimate data points while keeping the focus constructive. It also lowers defensiveness because it presents interpretation as provisional rather than absolute. Reflection demonstrates listening, while validation builds trust that input will not be ignored or mischaracterized. Even if the interpretation is slightly off, the act of checking opens space for correction and deeper dialogue. This technique reduces miscommunication, especially when verbal and nonverbal signals conflict. Reflect and validate practices strengthen group alignment by ensuring that everyone feels seen and understood, creating a more accurate and empathetic foundation for decision-making. Heat management is vital when nonverbal cues indicate rising tension. Signs such as sharper tones, clipped responses, or overlapping interruptions suggest that the group's emotional temperature is climbing. Facilitators can manage this heat by pausing for short breaks, reframing the issue, or narrowing scope to focus on manageable elements. For example, if two participants repeatedly clash, the facilitator might step in with, "Let's pause and clarify the core concern before continuing." This reduces escalation and keeps the discussion productive. Heat management does not mean suppressing disagreement, but channeling it constructively. By intervening early, facilitators prevent emotional energy from overwhelming rational dialogue. Teams that normalize heat management learn to see rising tension as a signal to adjust process rather than as a threat. This perspective transforms conflict from a destabilizer into a manageable part of collaboration, keeping focus on shared outcomes. Remote cues handling adapts nonverbal awareness to distributed environments. In virtual meetings, visual signals may be limited or distorted, so facilitators rely on alternative cues such as response timing, chat activity, or voice tone. Setting norms for response windows, such as acknowledging questions within a minute in chat, even without a full answer, prevents misinterpretation of silence. Encouraging written reactions or emoji responses makes engagement visible when audio participation is limited. Regular audio checks ensure that technology does not mask contribution, as poor sound quality may be mistaken for disengagement. For example, if a participant's responses are delayed, the facilitator might clarify whether latency or hesitation is at play. Remote cues handling emphasizes explicitness, since assumptions are riskier when visual feedback is scarce. By making distributed signals readable, teams sustain inclusion and trust, ensuring that distance does not erode collaboration quality. Observation notes help facilitators and teams learn from patterns across sessions, rather than treating each meeting in isolation. By recording recurring signals, such as who interrupts most often, when energy dips, or how silence correlates with specific agenda items, teams can identify systemic issues. For example, notes might reveal that long silences consistently follow technical deep dives, suggesting a need for clearer framing or additional context. Observation notes are not about judging individuals, but about improving facilitation techniques and agenda design. Sharing anonymized patterns with the team encourages collective responsibility for improving dynamics. Over time, these notes become a resource for refining practices and building shared awareness of interaction norms. By tracking patterns systematically, teams reduce the chance of repeating unproductive dynamics and reinforce the principle that nonverbal cues are not random. They are feedback for continuous improvement. Team awareness building empowers everyone to read and respond to nonverbal cues, not just facilitators. By teaching common pitfalls and introducing meta-language, teams create shared tools for managing interactions. For example, signals such as slow down, one at a time, or let's park that and return, provide respectful ways to surface needs. Awareness training helps participants recognize when interruptions exclude others, or when collective energy is drifting. It also normalizes reflection on communication styles, reducing stigma around differences. For instance, teaching that silence may reflect processing rather than disengagement prevents misjudgments. By making nonverbal awareness explicit, teams distribute responsibility for maintaining clarity and inclusion. This approach builds resilience, since group dynamics do not depend solely on the facilitator. Over time, awareness practices turn teams into self-regulating systems that use cues to support smoother, more equitable collaboration. Feedback on signaling is another layer of continuous improvement. Instead of policing identity or style, feedback focuses on observable behaviors and their effects. For example, rather than saying, "You're too aggressive," a teammate might offer, "When you interrupt others, stop sharing ideas. Could you try waiting until they finish?" This approach avoids judgment and provides options for adjustment. Feedback on signaling helps individuals understand how their nonverbal habits affect group dynamics. It also reinforces shared accountability, since everyone is responsible for clarity and inclusion. Delivering feedback respectfully models emotional intelligence, demonstrating that nonverbal awareness is about improvement, not criticism. Over time, these conversations shift culture toward openness, where feedback about signaling is treated as supportive input. This normalizes adaptation, helping individuals refine their communication and strengthening the team's collective ability to collaborate effectively. Inclusive turn-taking norms protect quieter voices from being overshadowed by frequent speakers. These norms include explicit invitations to those who have not spoken, rotation of first speakers, and limits on serial contributions. For example, after noticing that two participants dominate discussion, the facilitator might say, "Let's hear from someone who hasn't spoken yet, before we continue." This signals that contributions are valued across the group, not just from the most vocal. Inclusive turn-taking not only balances airtime, but also improves decision quality, since diverse perspectives surface. It also builds psychological safety, encouraging those who might otherwise hesitate to contribute. Over time, explicit norms reduce the need for constant intervention as the group internalizes equitable practices. By embedding fairness into participation, inclusive turn-taking transforms nonverbal awareness into structural equity, ensuring that all voices shape team outcomes. Risk management for misreads acknowledges that even skilled facilitators will occasionally interpret cues incorrectly. What matters is how quickly and gracefully they correct course. Explicit checks, such as asking, "Am I reading hesitation correctly?" allow participants to clarify without embarrassment. Willingness to revise facilitation moves when new information emerges demonstrates humility and reinforces trust. For example, if a pause interpreted as disagreement turns out to be reflection, the facilitator can adjust by saying, "Thanks for clarifying. I'll give more space for thinking next time." By modeling flexibility, facilitators show that interpretation is provisional, not absolute. This reduces the risk of eroding credibility through overconfidence. Risk management is not about avoiding mistakes, but about responding to them responsibly. By treating misreads as opportunities for learning, facilitators build resilience into team interactions, keeping trust and inclusion intact even when signals are complex. Leadership modeling demonstrates how to use nonverbal awareness constructively. Leaders who maintain calm tone, measured pace, and openness to correction signal that room reading is not about control, but about collective care. For example, a leader who pauses to ask, "I may be misreading. Does this concern feel bigger than we're naming?" models humility and curiosity. Their behavior sets the tone for the group, making it safe for others to acknowledge and discuss signals openly. Leadership modeling also reinforces fairness, as leaders show they are subject to the same norms as everyone else. By embodying nonverbal sensitivity, leaders legitimize it as a shared responsibility, not a special skill reserved for facilitators. This creates cultural continuity, ensuring that nonverbal awareness is practiced consistently across levels of authority. Leadership modeling is therefore both symbolic and practical, embedding nonverbal intelligence into the organization's DNA. Effectiveness metrics help teams evaluate whether nonverbal awareness is improving collaboration. Indicators include participation equity, decision clarity, meeting satisfaction, and rework caused by misunderstanding. For example, if balanced participation rises over time and fewer decisions require revisiting due to misalignment, nonverbal practices are having positive impact. Meeting satisfaction surveys may capture whether participants feel heard and respected, while tracking rework highlights whether signals are being addressed early. These metrics reinforce accountability, turning nonverbal awareness from a soft skill into a measurable contributor to performance. They also provide feedback loops for refining facilitation techniques. Metrics need not be complex. Even simple observation of participation balance can reveal improvement. By tracking outcomes, teams demonstrate that investing in nonverbal awareness pays dividends in reliability and trust. Measurement anchors cultural shifts in evidence, reinforcing the legitimacy of practices that might otherwise feel intangible. Continuous improvement cadence ensures that nonverbal practices remain effective over time. Teams revisit norms, facilitation techniques, and observation methods, pruning those that add friction and amplifying those that support clarity and inclusion. For example, if structured rounds feel too rigid, they may be replaced with gentler speaking order prompts. If new remote tools emerge, norms are updated to interpret cues more accurately. Continuous improvement prevents practices from becoming stale or performative, keeping them aligned with evolving needs. It also reinforces that nonverbal awareness is a living discipline, not a one-time training. Regular review strengthens ownership, as teams co-create the norms that govern their interactions. By maintaining cadence, organizations ensure that nonverbal awareness grows with the team, sustaining relevance and impact. This adaptability demonstrates that paying attention to subtle signals is not a static rule, but a dynamic capability that must evolve alongside collaboration itself. Nonverbal synthesis emphasizes that reading the room is less about decoding secrets and more about responding thoughtfully to subtle signals. Careful, culturally aware interpretation helps facilitators notice when pace, tone, or posture suggests adjustment is needed. Inclusive practices, structured rounds, and calibrated probing ensure that participation is balanced and misunderstandings are clarified. Leadership modeling, observation notes, and continuous improvement embed nonverbal awareness into culture, making it a shared responsibility. Metrics connect these practices to tangible improvements in clarity, inclusion, and decision quality. The ultimate goal is not flawless interpretation but improved conversation, fewer misreads, more voices included, and stronger decisions made on shared understanding. By combining humility, empathy, and structure, nonverbal awareness converts subtle contextual data into practical action, strengthening trust and accelerating reliable delivery without over-reliance on guesswork. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.